When it comes to mental health and attendance in school, a lot of our teenagers and a lot of our kids are really falling short. What is the cause of this and how can we help them? Today's guest is going to give you more information on that, so stay tuned. Welcome back. My name is Sarah. This is a Sarah Kleiner Wellness YouTube channel. And today I have Daniel White, who is the founder of the Sleep Better Foundation. Now, this is such a cool project. And if you are the parent of a child or a grandparent of a child or teenager who is struggling with sleep, who's struggling with grades, who's struggling with their mental health, this episode is something that you're definitely going to want to watch and share with as many friends and family members as you possibly can. Daniel actually started his foundation out of his own pain points of being someone who is addicted to gaming, to using video games. And one of the things that he realized on his journey to health is the role that light plays in our mental health, plays in our metabolism, plays in our mood, and our ability to focus and concentrate the next day. So what Daniel has done is created this amazing foundation where he's giving blue light blocking glasses to teenagers, and he's doing studies to show how just something as simple as wearing blue light blocking glasses during the video game time, so he's not even taking away their screens or their video game times, is improving their grades, their cognition, and their mental health. And this is a small scale study that he's doing, and he's going to continue doing this study more and more and more. And we want to spread this information to as many people as possible. So again, please share this out with anybody who you feel can be helped by this information. And if you want to donate to the foundation, I'm going to put a link to Daniel's foundation down in the show notes for you as well. So thank you again for watching. And I want to thank two sponsors of today's episode. The first one is going to be Viva Rays. Now, believe it or not, Viva Rays is actually a contributor to Daniel's foundation. They have been donating blue light blocking glasses to the foundation. So they're a fantastic company. You can use my code YOGI to save on their blue light blocking glasses. That link will be down in the show notes for you. And it's just a really great way to protect your circadian rhythms. The second sponsor of today's episode is going to be Optimal Carnivore. You can use my code carnivore uppercase Y to save on their organ meat supplements or their liver complex or their brain nourish product. All of these are fantastic ways to fill in those nutritional gaps in your diet. And they are just a fantastic company in general. So thank you to those two sponsors. I hope that you guys enjoy today's episode with Daniel, and I will talk with you again very soon. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm super excited about today's guest. Now, Daniel and I actually met before I had my baby. So about 5 months ago or so, we did a chat for the Quantum Biology Collective. And I was just blown away with Daniel's mission and what he's trying to do, especially for young people. So I'm so excited to talk with Daniel today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be back here chatting with you again. I'm really excited to share everything that we've been up to recently.
Yeah. So I'm not going to put out the interview that the Quantum Biology Collective, you and I did. So maybe we can bring people up to speed on what your mission, what you've been doing, because it's just so incredibly cool. So just start where, if you want to start with your story, if you want to start with your, just wherever you feel is relevant, and we'll just roll with it.
Yeah, awesome. I'll try to make this shorter rather than longer, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm 29 years old. I'm the founder of an organization called Sleep Better, Live Better. And I'm also the chairman of our foundation. Now, my health journey really began about 15 years ago when, as a young teenager, I became very obsessed with gaming and very connected to artificial light and technology. And, 15 years ago, I was one of the only children I knew at the time who was spending so much time in front of screens. This was before iPhones and smartphones were really catching on. There was Xboxes and PlayStations, but it was kind of like, it was mostly offline, all of that sort of stuff. And so there wasn't this huge pull, but I got into, massive multiplayer online games. And really, really quickly, I found myself hooked. And, that dopamine driven behavior of more gaming, later and later bedtimes, my interest in my academic pursuits kind of faded very quickly, much to the unhappiness of my mother at the time. And before I knew it, I had dropped out of school. I'd been, moved from quite a prestigious school down into one of the more public schools. I wasn't attending at all. I was absent about 75, 80% of the time. I put on about 3, 4, 5 stone in weight. In kilos, in pounds, that's about, 80 pounds, 90 pounds.
Wow.
A lot of weight over a period of, 3 years. I was depressed. I was anxious. Anytime that the light was taken away from me, anytime that dopamine driven addictive behavior was stripped from my bedroom, which, my parents tried many times, I was suicidal. I was, anxious. I was a complete wreck. Every single area of my life was suffering really badly. And the majority of, that impact I feel now came down to the amount of light that I was exposed to. Now, I never recognized that at the time. Age 17, I went to high school. I decided I'm going to do something about my health. I started counting calories and hitting the gym twice a day and, doing all the conventional health and fitness stuff. I got more and more miserable, ended up very obsessive around my health behaviors. That led to its own, challenges. Went to university, studied a degree in psychology. And I always laugh and say it taught me a hell of a lot about how not to treat people. Conversation was just drug therapies and coaching or, counseling or, how do we deal with these issues? And like intuitively, I never felt that those approaches were for me, really. So, I kind of got through those years, and towards the end of my psychology degree, one of my best friends introduced me to a book by a guy called Mark Sisson. I don't know if you've ever been exposed to the Primal Blueprint. So this was, probably back when the paleo movement was quite young. And, Mark was saying, go outside, be in nature, exercise outdoors, eat more variety, eat seasonally. And I made a few changes to my health. And over the course of a couple of months, I remember waking up one day and kind of actually crying in bed because I realized I wasn't depressed anymore. I wasn't anxious. I, wasn't feeling as obsessive. And I kind of felt like, wow, I might have found some purpose that I can now go out and pursue this kind of health stuff. So I went on to do degrees in nutritional neuroscience. I became a nutritionist and then studied functional medicine as well. So I was building up this like holistic picture of health, mind, body, spirit, looking at stress management, breath work, touching lightly on sleep, relaxation, routines, all these sorts of things. And then about 5 years ago, I suffered a period of burnout in my career. It was after my career partner, he left and moved away, and a project that we were working on, I was kind of really, driven by that kind of collapsed, and myself and my girlfriend at the time separated. And I did what, type 3 Enneagram, I don't know if any of you are into Enneagram, does, and he works harder, he works harder. I can see your 3 wings sometimes. But I worked harder and harder and harder, and I burnt the candle at both ends. And, I was just exhausted. My testosterone was tanking. I had no libido, no energy. And my mental health again was really messy. And I was really, really fortunate that one day I somehow stumbled across a post by, I think, our mutual friend, Nathan Walls.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And he had shared something by, Jack Cruz, who we both know as well. And they were just talking about like sunrise and light exposure. And I didn't really get very much about it at the time, but I thought, I'm up at 5 a.m. anyway. I'm going to bed at 1 a.m. I might as well go and start watching the sunrise instead of sitting in my bed. And so I did that. I bought my first pair of blue light blocking glasses from RA Optics. And within about a week or two, I just felt like a new person. My sleep rhythms had normalized. I was just feeling amazing. And I kind of instantly, my mind began to think, how can I use this information to impact more people, and to change lives. So I started on the journey of Sleep Better, Live Better, which was, an ebook initially, and then became an online course. And then I was training with organizations, providing talks and stuff like that. And this went on, working with adults. We started to provide blue light blocking glasses. At the time, nobody in the United Kingdom was really selling them. And I wasn't doing it for the sales purpose, but they were very expensive to import from the US. So I wanted to, provide them to my community. And this went on. And I don't know about you, you've worked with clients in coaching, adults can be a bit resistant to change. They're like, oh, I've done this my whole life, the sleep narrative, the story. And so I was getting a bit frustrated in that work. And I was going through a business accelerator program. And they said to me, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, you need to be aware of your origin story. And I thought back to the first day when I walked into school and, saw all these pretty ladies everywhere and thought, oh God, I need to sort my health out, and laugh and joke. And, that was never the origin. But it took me back to, my teenage years and realizing that the reason that my health had been sabotaged so badly in my youth was because of incredible amounts of artificial light exposure. I suddenly made the connection that, every single one, this, it raises the hairs on my arms. Like back then it was a handful of us, and now it's millions of children all across the world are exposed to hugely increasing amounts of artificial light, technology, frequencies, sedentariness, all of this stuff. And it's not going away. The genie's out of the bottle. And I kind of had this crazy idea. I was there like, it's the kids, right? I need to help the kids. I'm on the right path, but I'm taking the wrong fork. And, I can support adults, but I want to focus on the children. And that night I had this dream, and it was crazy, really. And I know it was a dream because the television program that I dreamt I was on doesn't exist anymore. But I was stood on a British television channel talking to the nation in the morning's correspondence. And I was saying how in the Channel Islands where I live, in a place called Guernsey, there's also another island called Jersey, that we had introduced some really simple, low-cost interventions that had transformed the mental health of children and adolescents, and that we were kind of paving the way for, basically changes across the entirety of society. And I woke up from this dream and I thought, oh, I'm going to have to go and do this thing now. And that was just over 2 years ago. And it began a journey which has seen the registration of a charitable foundation, thousands of hours of my time voluntarily, fundraising, building connections in the government where I live with educational institutions, writing proposals and project plans and all of this stuff. And it's culminated in the Guernsey School Sleep Project, which we've launched 3 weeks ago, where with the help of local sponsors and also Viva Rays, who I'm sure you are well aware of, Rudy and the team, we have provided so far 500 pairs of blue light blocking glasses, as well as sleep education to adolescent children between the age of 14 and 17 in Guernsey. And this is kind of like a first phase, and we have some more glasses, and we're going about it in a very scientific way. I don't know whether our data is going to be solid enough to publish. However, we have sought the approval of various ethics committees, and we're using, validated questionnaires, and we've been in schools working with children to improve sleep and overall health. So that's the kind of gist of it, is that I now feel that I'm back, doing what I really should be doing. And I'm not sure about the direction of everything in the future, but so far, by the feedback I've had from dozens and dozens of parents in my inbox, things are going really, really well, and kids are sleeping, much better than they ever have, at least in this cohort. So that's kind of what I guess brings me here to talk to you.
That's so exciting. And, my partner, Carrie Bennett, and I just had this conversation with a group that we're talking with about there was a member in our group that we're coaching right now. And she said, I have I think it was a 13-year-old. And, the teenagers, they don't go to sleep till 1 o'clock because they just don't need as much sleep. And Carrie and I said, actually, they need more sleep as teenagers. And we actually talked about your study and what you've been doing for teenagers. And I think it's so important because, number one, I think a lot of parents might be under the impression that teenagers don't sleep as much, right? But number two, the what you've seen just by giving blue blockers to these kids, right? And you're not even giving them the red ones. You're giving them like the yellow ones, right? So there's like adherence, because I think sometimes with the red ones, you can't really see what you're looking at on the screen as well. So you're not even using like the high powered blue light blocking glasses, but you're giving these glasses to teenagers, and you're seeing them sleep better. You're seeing them perform better in school and have less depression and anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a really interesting journey. So I've been in talks with somebody from a very, very prestigious university. I won't mention their name at the moment. And we began to discuss, the various different factors impacting adolescents' sleep. Now, there's a lot of scientific literature around chronotypes. Now, being someone whose chronotype has changed over time, I'm a little bit hesitant to always
skeptical.
Skeptical of chronotype research. But however, having said that, it could be, and it seems to be, undeniably, a modern manifestation of, our social environment, right? And there's this common belief in the scientific community that teenagers and adolescents, their clocks shift, right? They phase delay until later. And whilst I don't necessarily agree that that happens to children living on the equator, I do think that it is happening to, children in most Western societies. And there's a big push, and there's been some amazing research done by some professors and other scientists looking at changing school start times, to shift the start of the day later, especially in the US, because some schools start, crazily early. And in the UK, these things are changing. And on our sister island of Jersey, which is just across the water from us, it's got about twice the population, about 120,000 people versus us. We're about 45 square miles and about 60,000 people. So it's a small community. But they're looking at trialing changes to school start times. And one very good friend of mine, a scientist, he said, it's the most powerful thing you can do to improve children's lives. And I was obviously super skeptical, thinking to myself, actually, I believe that changes to the light environment, and education about circadian health, I may be somewhat, biased towards it because of the impact it's had on my health. So I was kind of there like, we'll see. And so the project developed, and what happened is we recruited all these students and we split them into one of 4 groups. Now, the first group receives the blue light blocking glasses only, and they're instructed, wear them from sunset until you go to sleep. Keep them on as long as you can, wear them during the night, try not to take them off, bang, go. The second group received 2 circadian health education lessons that I delivered, and the glasses. So these kids are getting educated about, circadian rhythms, impacts of light exposure, some of the science, looking at artificial light, natural light, all of this sort of stuff, eating timing, movement, use of caffeine, some other these commonalities amongst teenagers. Then in the third group, we did just the education. And in the fourth group, we put them on what's called a wait list. So they're like the control group. They're doing nothing. And all of the kids in every cohort, they're completing questionnaires at the beginning, then 2 weeks later, then at the end. So we've looked at their chronotype in the first questionnaire to see whether, later chronotypes will benefit more from the education in glasses. We've also looked at, their sleep quality, their sleep consistency, all of these sorts of things across these validated questionnaires. And what we're now waiting to see is, which of these interventions has been more impactful. And as I went to deliver these interventions in the schools over the course of the last 3 weeks, I realized something quite profound. And that is that whilst these glasses are incredible and they're fundamental, cornerstone of light management, especially for teenagers who are going to use technology, right? You can't take it away from them. They won't let you, they won't speak to you if you do.
Right.
As well as that, there are teenagers in there who are so tired and exhausted that they couldn't even stay awake, talking, listening to me talk. And I'm a pretty engaging guy, I'm on the stage, I'm giving them education. But it made me realize that because of what we've done in modern society, it's not just the glasses and the light, which are, for me, fundamental, like the education piece has to be there. But like, we're now going to hopefully explore changes to school start times as well as those things. Because, for some of those kids that I've seen whose lives are clearly already just being destroyed by their lack of sleep, that I don't think even they're switched on enough to engage with these kinds of interventions. So that was quite scary for me, but it was also very empowering because I realized that, there's a place for all of this stuff. The main thing for us is, as soon as we get that generation sleeping better, we have a brighter future on this planet.
Yeah. And I think it's just part of the, like I said, it's part of the conversation, part of the culture that we just accept that these kids are supposed to be staying up late and, let's adjust everything for them. But even that, they're not even able to stay awake in school. They're not able to engage, not able to learn. And you and I both are really well versed in circadian rhythms and depression and anxiety. And how many of these kids do you think are also struggling with those issues as well?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that allowed me to get into the schools was that their attendance services and the psychology services for these institutions, they are lost. Since COVID, they do not know what to do. The rates of attendance at schools are the lowest they've ever been. Obviously, you and I know that there's been massive increases in technology use since COVID, time inside and front of screens, more addiction to technology, less social interaction, the feeding of circadian disruption into anxiety, into social anxiety, into exam stress, all of these, it's not one thing. It's, this circadian disruption is like the the tide that's lowering all of the ships in the whole harbor, so it's so fundamental, and I think they've got a real job in their hands. But I hope that, like, for me, I've always seen these things as like the low-hanging fruit.
Right
It's this thing you can do.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about just more about the study that you've done. Because is it just one study, or have there been a couple studies now that you've run?
Yeah, so we did a pilot study in one of the local schools last year where we provided about 100 pairs to staff and students, and we saw across the board improvements in sleep quality, sleep satisfaction, sleep duration, improvements in alertness, next day alertness, reductions in stress and anxiety around sleep, and that was from a really short intervention, and that was without any education like whatsoever. So I can already feel, deep in my bones that those children who really received the why behind this stuff, they're now being set up for life. I think that personally, the direction in which this is going to go is that there's going to be children that really adopt this, and then there's going to be the children that don't, and that gap of like mental health and performance, and is going to become so much more noticeable because you've now got kids that are sleeping a lot better, and there are a lot that haven't and won't have changed their routines. But the aim for me has always been an agenda of public health. It's a fine line to walk. I'm very fortunate that I did master's and bachelor's degrees in science, and I understand the scientific method, and so I've been able to apply as much rigor towards this as I can, to ensure that there's no biases in the data, or at least that they're minimized. But at the same time, it's a tightrope between do you want to try and do something that's able to be published in an academic journal and has all this rigor, that can take long periods of time, and you're delaying things for months and months and months, or are you getting this public health intervention into the hands of the children that need it as quickly as possible, because there are millions of children out there who are suffering all over the world. One of the things I love about working with children most is that they aren't always that challenging to engage with around behavior change. They're there like, I feel sad, this guy's telling me if I wear these glasses I'll sleep better, I won't feel so sad, I'm going to try it. They put the glasses on, they sleep all night, and then the next day they go into their mum and dad, why aren't you wearing the glasses?
Exactly. I was going to ask you that next. Like, how do we get our kids to do it if we're not doing it? That's the thing. And that's what we try to do in our house, is like lead by example as the parents, and my kids probably think I'm insane. I know that my son's just going to grow up like, okay, well, this is just how adults are. But I feel like, for a study like this, and especially that first kind of pilot one you did, was there any pushback from the parents, or how did the parents kind of interact with that first pilot study that you did?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. One of the reasons that I moved away from parents, I mean, don't get me wrong, we post a lot of content aimed at parents to help engage them, and there's always going to be like this 20% of parents that want to do something. There's this 6% that are like in the middle. I'm not sure if this is a bit hocus pocus, and then there's 20% that really ignore you. One of the things for me was, I'm just going to target the kids and see what happens. And there's a lot of talk in the community. I mean, we haven't put anything out publicly yet because we're waiting for some, official PR and comm stuff from certain institutions. But the feedback so far has been that, parents are contacting me now. Parents are wanting them. Parents are buying them for more of their children. Parents are really like engaging with this. And I guess, in our Western world, parents are really struggling, the majority of them.
Yes.
They're picking up financial stress and worries post-COVID. They themselves are probably more addicted to technology and exposed to light than ever before. In Guernsey right now, we're in the middle of the winter. It's been a really dark and miserable winter. And so, one of the things that I've really loved about this, and it's been a labor of love, because, the last 2 years of my life, as I said, thousands of hours. I put myself on the financial breadline, there's been points where I've been down to my last $50 trying to get this thing going. But now it's really showing how much appreciation and gratitude these parents have, because they've not had to do a lot. They've not had to continually exhaust themselves to try and get their children to get to bed earlier. Kids are still gaming,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a secret. Occasionally I still game. But, I've got my glasses on and I'm not awake past 9 p.m. because
Yeah,
when
it's
I'm
hard
wearing,
to stay awake once you have the glasses on.
that's it, right? And
Yeah.
so kids are like awakening to it. They're understanding, and parents, I think, at this stage are just really grateful. It is still very, very early days. I'm surrendering. It's like a surrender experiment as to where this goes next. But I see, more engagement from the community and adults as the children, adopt it at a broader level.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to get the parents on board as much as humanly possible and educate them as well, because like my husband and I, with my daughter, she would be on an iPad 24/7 if we allowed it. She just loves it. And autistic kids, they love iPads. I mean, it gives them a lot of repetition and they can kind of go in their own world. And so, but we just have this agreement. We're not going to let her waste away on an iPad. And so we have to have rules in our house with us. Like if she sees us on a phone or on a device, like how can we tell her she's 15? Like, how can we tell her she's not allowed to be on an iPad and have the device? And so I think like just educating everyone is key. So do you have kind of plans to do a program for parents, or is your study right now just focusing on the kids? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I can relate to what you're saying about children. My daughter's 2.5 years old. She only lives with me some of the week, and she lives with her mother the rest of the week. And at home, it's red lights around. It's
the glasses and red lights and the weird light bulbs and
all of that stuff. Candles. The last couple of weeks, actually, after a little bit of self-experimentation, I realized that the brightness of lights really seems to keep me awake longer as well. So
even the red lights can do that. I was talking with one of my friends about that. So just candles, huh?
I've gone full like hominid on this. It's brilliant.
I love it.
But I know that, in her other home environment, no judgment whatsoever, she doesn't receive the same sleep treatment, if you like. So it's a case of like, you can't be what you can't see, right? I grew up a lot of my life with habits that I wouldn't repeat. But I was exposed to the right types of people, and maybe me going into schools has not impacted some children, but it's planted a seed, and it's a possibility. In the future, where do we plan to go with this? I'm having conversations with academics around larger scale interventions that combine, these multiple different aspects. And that would be my dream, I think, to be able to conduct real research, go back into academia a little bit, maybe get a PhD done around a real big, world-changing study. But in the meantime, there's the public health aspect of it, and for me, my charity, we raised just enough money and had enough support again, from Viva Rays with their awesome lenses to get this project over the line. And for now, really, it's about fundraising more money so that I can go out there and deliver these interventions without putting my own livelihood at risk. Because I don't regret a single thing that I've done, but it's been hard to put food on my table sometimes when I've had to prioritize this project, which has been time sensitive, against going out and finding clients or finding business and things like that. And so I know that the reward comes with the the building of it. Build it and they shall come, is the saying, is it not? But yeah, it's now I need to, and I'm really glad that we've had this conversation, because I need to go back to the manifestation board, I think, and I need to go, what's phase 3? Is it gaining support from education institutions? Are there people out there even listening to this right now who have built programs for kids and schools and want to get involved? Because that's certainly communicating with younger audiences isn't my expertise. There's a reason that I targeted the 14 to 20 year olds, because I know how to communicate with them. What's that kid, right? But at the same time, it's it'll be where the need is, I guess. I don't be naive enough to believe that I know everything. I don't. And in speaking with more, like the other island close to us, for example, they're already reaching out, asking me for help. So it's a case of what do you guys need? How can we respond to that need? And hopefully create blueprints through this work that we can scale to other education groups across the world, as well as businesses and things like that. But primarily for me, the focus is certainly on the younger generation.
Absolutely. And that was the hope of bringing you
here on the show is I really want to expose my audience to your work and make them aware of it, that it's something that's going on. And if anybody that's watching or listening wants to support what Daniel's doing, then there'll be a link in the show notes that you can donate and learn more, follow what he's doing and support it. And I know I have a lot of parents that listen to the show. And I think that the parents that do listen to my show are really interested in circadian biology and quantum biology. And, we do have to help our children. We do have to look to them. They are the future, and then they're going to be raising future generations. And I think you and I both are on the same page when we see, the kid. I don't think I'm just being one of these like old people. It's like, oh, kids these days, you know how it is. Like my husband and I have the conversations, all the music these days, the kids, but seriously, I think that this is what one of the things we really have to do is educate people on circadian health. And the more I learn about it, I know the more you learn about it and work with clients as well, the more I see how it affects every aspect of your life, from your body's metabolism, your body's ability to maintain energy homeostasis, weight loss, weight gain, depression, anxiety, mood, disease, cancer, like metabolic disorders. And so I feel like our children are getting sicker younger and younger these days, and if we don't get this information out, if we don't start to do projects like this, I think that we're going to be in a more of a crisis than we already are. Would you say?
Yeah, I think it's one of these things, I always draw this parallel between like cigarette smoking, in the 50s, 60s, doctors were like, oh, there's no problem with cigarettes. We recommend cigarettes. It's okay. And then, the research and the data comes in about lung cancer and, all these other diseases. And they say, oh, let's put a filter on that cigarette. And obviously that was all driven by the cigarette industry, right? The doctors were the pawns. And now we have, telecommunications industry and technology industry who, support us to advance human civilizations, but they're also very aware of, the addictive nature of technology and screens and certain frequencies and wavelengths of light and what it does to the brain. And so when they give you a night shift mode on your phone and you think that's enough to improve your sleep, you're only being told half the truth. And that's what angers me, that's what really angers me. And it's what drives me as well. And I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by, people who share that inspiration. But I honestly believe, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, we'll look back and there'll be policy in workplaces, in schools, in organizations, in hospitals that will, clearly outline the types of human-centric lighting that are allowed to be, placed in these sorts of places. And we will look back on this as like a giant disaster for humanity that we allowed our children to go through this. And I personally, I can't sit around to wait and watch that disaster happen. I think the kids will solve this problem. I think the kids will catch on. I'm already seeing it now. I think, news travels fast on TikTok and Instagram and places where the kids hang out these days. So, it's like I said, it's about planting seeds in those children's minds and watching where it really goes. And with regards to, the support as a foundation, we're always thrilled to have people support us. I think at the point we're at now, yes, a foundation is always going to need financial support to carry out, objectives, but ultimately, it's things like, how do we get the message out to the kids better? How do we maintain, I'm a one-man band. I'm the only person in the foundation, right? So, how do I maintain putting out education through social media channels? How do I get our YouTube channel started? How do I do all these things as well as juggle parenting myself and my own business and my own clients and this foundation and the research and getting enough sleep myself and, all of this sort of stuff. So what I hope is that, we've set a really clear precedent, as a foundation that is attracting other people towards us and that people are curious and interested. And I hope that, a wave, a movement, will swell around this, because we're starting with every child in the Channel Islands, but be sure that we're coming for your family too, and just because we're not chatting to your family and chatting to your children's school right now doesn't mean that we won't be in 3 years or in 5 years. And, we won't be training people to deliver this as part of, personal health education in schools. They get taught about sex education, they get taught about, drugs and alcohol and all these sorts of mandates that states, and areas all over the world have. And pretty soon, it's going to be like contraindications of technology lessons.
Yes.
That I guess is the vision for me. That's what I see in the future.
Yeah, I think so, because it's terrifying to see, when you go out in public, which it's easy to not do these days, because we have technology. We can do things like Zoom, and we can have our groceries delivered to us. I don't know about where you live, if it's that way, but where I live here in the city, I never have to leave my house if I don't want to, but when I do go out, it's like everyone is kind of like has their phone like glued to their hand and is looking down, and we're missing connection with nature. We're missing connection with each other. We're missing all of that because we're so addicted to this blue light, this dopamine inducing blue light. And I just have people, like I have my phone here is red. It's like, I don't know. And anyone watching, they're like, how do you do that? Just go onto YouTube. There we go. Yes, there we go. Just go into YouTube and type turn phone screen red, and you'll figure out a way to do it. There's tons of videos to show you how to do it. But one of the things that I noticed when I turn my phone screen red, and I talk about this all the time with clients, and I've talked about it on the podcast a million times, and I don't know about you, but when I keep it red is I don't need to be on it 24/7. It's not as interesting to me, because there's not that huge dose of blue light that's like getting my dopamine up super high. And so I think just doing something small like that, right, is so key.
That's why these things are so much more than the enhancement of melatonin and the reduction of cortisol, right? They are tools to deal with addiction, as is sunlight exposure. Cruz talks all the time about like the regulation of dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, cortisol, epinephrine, all of these hormones and neurotransmitters as a result of sunlight exposure. Well, when we get that light dialed in, you and I know that, we're more present, we're more grounded, we're less addicted, our behaviors are more long-term gratification as opposed to instant gratification. And I hear you completely on the light with the phone. I'm no better than kids sometimes. I can be walking down the street. I like to be outdoors, and send emails when I can and things like that. So yeah, sometimes I'm staring into my phone screen and I'm working, but I get caught up in it as well. And
yeah, me too.
When you put these things on though, it's like I've had a lot of feedback from the last 3 weeks of the trial that I'm just not so interested in my technology. I'm just not so interested in staying in late at night. It's an ongoing like hamster cage. What came first, the blue light or the gaming, the gaming dopamine hit, or the blue light dopamine hit, or the whatever Instagram scroll. How do you break that cycle? We change the light first. You don't tell the kid to get off the phone. You don't argue with them. You don't, take their technology away from them. You don't create resentment. You just say to them, look, if you want to feel better, which you do, because everyone does, right? Universally, at least the majority of people I've met want to feel better in their lives. Do what you're doing, but just put these things on while you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're partnering with Rudy, because I know he's been on the show before. Rudy is the owner of Evolutionary, and he has a story of dealing with ADHD and dealing with, as a teenager and as a child, not able to stay in the classroom, running away from the school. I've had him on to talk about this before. And when I didn't
make it to the school.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, but when you kind of discover like the power of light, you can't go back to the old ways. And I feel like kids, their brains are not fully developed until they're 25. If we can get to them early, in this way, instead of what's happening the other way, their brains are developing and they're around all this non-native EMF and they're around all this light, and God only knows how it's maldeveloping, their brains. What are the consequences on our children? And I think we're seeing that in increased suicide, the serious problems. These kids are committing suicide, and these kids are having these horrible health issues and side effects. And I honestly, and a lot of people are straight to run to the seed oils, the food. Yeah, that's problematic. let's not act like it's okay to eat crap. You and I are both health coaches and have, you've read all of Mark's work, Mark Sisson's work, and we know we don't want to be eating junk food. Yeah. But I think a larger conversation is junk light. And solving for the junk light, I think, for me, in my experience, as someone who has had food addiction issues and alcohol, drug addiction issues, when I get my light correct, the other stuff is not as enticing, to go binge eat the chips and eat the junk. It's just, I don't really have the same desire for it. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I mean, I didn't go too deeply into it because of time and stuff, but my young adult life, my late teen life, I didn't take antidepressants, but I smoked a lot of pot to try and get through, the anxiety and the depression that I experienced. And with that came addictions to food and these binging and fasting cycles and entire sense of self, or based around, am I on the diet or off the diet, and all of this sort of stuff. And all that noise just faded away when I started to go outside.
Me too.
Started to get into nature, and blocking the blue light in the glasses, that's the fundamental first step, but it's not the only step. It's like, go the hell outside.
Yeah.
That symbiotic relationship with nature is the most beautiful thing we'll ever experience. It takes a while to feel it, really, when you've been indoors for so long, but I laugh all the time. So I once was given quite a lot of resistance from somebody in Guernsey around the project and the glasses. And this person said to me, oh, it seems like this is going to cost money. You might have an agenda here and all this. I had all these questions, obviously, and we had to go through various conflict of interest hoops. As an organization, we do sell the glasses as well. We haven't used our glasses. We've used B-raised lenses and all this. And he said to me, much simpler. We've got this intervention that seems to really improve kids' health. He didn't even connect it to sleep at the time. And he said, we call it the daily mile. And so what happens is every morning, children go outside and they walk a mile before school around the playground. And I said to them, it's really ironic that you should say that, because what I'm talking about here is light and dark cycles. And so you've already essentially started the kids off on the right footing, in the morning, by getting them outdoors into the morning wavelengths of light. They're stimulating their everything. And then all I'm doing is trying to complement the end of the day, the bit you're currently missing, which is, getting them in the darkness. And obviously they saw it from a point of view of movement for the kids, not just exposure. But like you said, this is something that frustrates me a lot with science, is that we cannot be so reductionist in the study of certain things, and I love, Andrew Huberman, fantastic guy. I love lots of people who share the evidence and share the science, but it's like there are not studies being done on the things that would create a better benefit. Like, what happens when we block all light at night? What happens when we sleep by candlelight? What happens when we're grounded, when we sleep and we're outside? That's another thing to mention, is like, get outside and take shoes off as well. And like how phenomenal the difference is. I have grounding equipment in my home and stuff like that. And, I try as much as possible. I'm really lucky I have a lovely balcony outside, but we're never going to get grants to study these things. We're never going to be able to use controls and experiments high enough to show the minutiae of the little effects that we're trying to change. But
there's no money in standing in your backyard with bare feet. There's no money in that. So why would we study?
There is no money in that. Just like there's no money in going outside and waking people up. I love these two quotes. One of them's a guy called Theodosius Dobzhansky. Took me a long time to learn how to pronounce his name. It says, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, right? So whenever I'm giving a talk, I always say, there's my lens number one, right? The evolutionary lens. And then like Walter Longo, I think he's a Californian researcher who looks at fasting and longevity. He says the trick is to marry evolution with science, right? So we put our first lens on and we deduce our hypothesis, yes, we were meant to be outdoors 24/7, every moment of every daylight. And, yes, we were supposed to be, devoid of all forms of bright blue and green artificial light, completely. And there was moonlight and, the lux of that isn't as high and all this sort of stuff. And we can kind of infer things from there, and then we can study them in a lab a bit, but you can see when there's spaces and gaps between the evolution and the science that hasn't been studied, and just be willing to accept that there's more that we don't understand and know. And then all you have to do is accept that, N equals 1. I'm going to get a t-shirt with that one. I think you are the experiment. There's only one person in the experiment of your life. Go and experiment with yourself and feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing I talk about so much on this show with just so many different guests, I had a heart doctor on yesterday and talking about structured water in the body. And he was talking about the benefits of grounding and infrared. And, it's like the thing that we kept saying in that conversation, I think is relevant in this conversation is like the simpler, the more that it's bringing you back to nature, the more that it's bringing you back to the way that we evolved, the way that we got here, the more you're probably getting closer to health. And I think that people, they want to take all these scientific studies and data and research, which is helpful and great, but they don't look at the funding behind it. Like this is a supplement manufacturer that's paying for this study, that, who's behind this information. Great data, but who's paying for this? What's the financial gain behind it?
You really have to look at the dietary guidelines and the things going on around that at the moment, and funding and Twinkies being more nutritious than good old grass-fed animal products and things like that. To know that there's something slightly wrong going on.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to what we said about the tech industry and such like that. Is that they don't want to hold their hands up and say, of course we're addicting kids, of course we're frying their brain cells, of course we're keeping them awake at night, because we want to sell products, and we want to sell products, and we don't have to go all the way up to the top of the chain to say there's some horrible nasty agenda. We can just come surface level down and go, there's people trying to sell stuff here. It's about profits, it's about consumerism, it's about stakeholders. They're not considering our health. No one's going to teach your kids this stuff. You have to teach your kids this stuff. You have to teach yourself this stuff. And that's part about it, is when you do, you feel better.
Exactly. It's just common sense. And I think that's the thing, is we just want people to feel better and kind of get back to what they're supposed to do. And I think my audience, especially, they're kind of undergoing and hopefully leading people in their communities, anyone listening, into this awakening, into this like, hey, wait a second, people are now saying like that these cereals are more nutritious than our ancestral foods, like because there was a study done. So I think that I think the people watching and listening to the show are in that space. And so I think that our job really is to continue to try to influence those in our lives. And that's why I think your work is so important. And I really, really want anyone listening to share this, support it in any way that you can, even if it's like, hey, I know somebody who might be able to help improve this effort, or connect Daniel with somebody who
maybe the principal of your school is interested in this kind of stuff. Maybe you're the principal of a school, you're in the teacher board. I'm more than happy for our foundation to provide glasses to your institutions to help you replicate what we're doing. It's not difficult. The formula's been generated now, and as you said, it's just like the wave. You drop the pebble and then the wave. And the people listening to this podcast, your audience, they're clearly early adopters, right? They get it, or they're getting into it. Obviously, the support of everybody is foundational at this point, but I think we're going to see really beautiful things happen over the coming years. And I always come back to, why am I doing this? It's about feeling the love. It's about, and I sat in every day for 2 years and meditated, using Joe Dispenza's recordings and techniques. And I was really, summoning this vision and bringing all of that energy that I could to this thing, never knowing if it was going to work out. And we have to believe, and that's a topic we can talk about together. But
oh yeah, absolutely, we can.
The best thing about light exposure, the best thing, is that the impacts on your health from going outside or blocking artificial light, they're instantaneous. You don't have to believe in them, right? You can't placebo your way out of blue light at night and sunlight during the day. And what I've seen from children is they start to ask questions. If that does that, then what does this do? And what does what I eat do? And what does that caffeine do to me when I drink it after school or before my sports club at 8 p.m. at night? And it's a low-hanging fruit. You're awakening people, you're shining the light. You're blocking the light, but you get people who kind of like get lit, if you want to call it that. The idea, and I did, from the first time I read that post by Jack Kruse, and from the first Joe Rogan episode I watched about red light therapy, and, you know, once you know that stuff, you can't unknow it. And so it's just presenting it to people. And this is where, you know, I do need help, is to present it to more people and present it in a way in which it becomes infectious. You know, it needs to be a story that spreads like wildfire. And that's the plan.
Yeah. Well, everyone listening, you guys, you hear this vision, you hear what Daniel's trying to do. So I'm going to make sure all of his links are in the show notes. So please, if you feel led to support, or if you know someone, I'll put your email address also in the show notes if you want to connect Daniel with anybody or anything. We're just throwing it out there, and we really, really do want to help future generations to keep educating people about these things as much as humanly possible. So this has been amazing. Anything else you want to add to this conversation? I feel like there's so much helpful stuff in here, but anything that's on your mind?
So our premise at Sleep Better, Live Better is that when we get deeper sleep, when our sleep quality improves, not just the quantity, but the quality, when we're more enriched and well recovered and rejuvenated and primed and ready for our lives, we become better mothers, and we become better fathers, we become better brothers, sisters, teachers, entrepreneurs, leaders, doctors, community members. We become better human beings. We don't need to change everything. We don't need to be perfect, but we need to walk in a better direction. And that journey begins with some really simple steps, and they're simple steps that everyone can take. And so that's why, you know, I've made it my life's mission to share this story, and to really promote it out into the communities. And I think that, as you and I know, there's nobody who cannot benefit from this stuff. I'll caveat that with maybe, you know, the yogis that are living in the Himalayas, they don't have any light. Maybe they don't need some blue blockers and this kind of but everybody else, you know, you're doing your own life a disservice by keeping your head under the ground.
Agree. I love it. Well, again, I'll make sure all of your links are in the show notes, and it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
No worries. Hopefully I'll be coming back to talk to you about, you know, how we've hit 1 million kids in a year's time.
We absolutely, I'm going to mark it down.
Thank you.